Teldrassil. We know it as the starting area where Night Elf players begin their journey in World of Warcraft. This once magnificent world tree stood as the pinnacle of Night Elf culture, a symbol of mystical beauty, hope, and resilience. But this place is more than just a starting point. It is a reflection of Night Elven heritage and the dangers we face in Azeroth. As the first sparks of the Fourth War began to spread across the world, this majestic beacon of civilization fell victim to the horrors of conflict and the cruelty of its enemies. In today's video, we'll dive into the lore and the history of this legendary world tree and the home that thrived beneath its branches. We'll explain its significance and tell the stories that are slowly fading into obscurity. Before we continue, it's important to touch upon the deep background lore of the Night Elves. Their story is vast and intricate, but I'll focus on what matters most to today's story. Around 15,000 years ago, a tribe of dark trolls, tired of war and conflict, settled near the radiant waters of the Well of Eternity, the source of all magic on Azeroth. Over time, the well's energies changed them. They grew taller, their skin turned violet, and their minds expanded. They shed their old troll ways and began a new life. They came to worship Elune, the moon goddess, and through dreams, visions, and old relics, they began to understand their place in the world. They discovered the name of Kalimdor for the continent they lived on and came to call themselves the Kaldorei, the children of the stars. As their influence spread across the continent, their presence was noticed by ancient forces. Among them was Cenarius, a wise and powerful demigod who took the Kaldorei under his wing. He taught them the ways of the wild and the balance of nature. With this help, the Kaldorei flourished. They built their capital, Elundris, beside the well and lived in harmony with nature and magic. But not all Kaldorei remained faithful to this balance. Some of them, especially the elite members of the society, were drawn to the arcane. These elite Kaldorei were known as the Highborn. During this Night Elven age of power, Queen Azshara rose to the throne. She was loved and revered by all, and the capital was renamed to Zin-Azshari, meaning glory of Azshara. She shared the Highborn's obsession with the Well of Eternity and encouraged them to push its limits. They obeyed her without question, burying themselves in magical study and experimentation. Their reckless use of arcane magic sent waves through the fabric of reality, reaching even into the twisting nether, an otherworldly plane of swirling chaos, bridging the infinite worlds of the universe. These disturbances drew the attention of Sargeras, the Dark Titan who sought to wipe out all life in the universe. Seeing an opportunity, he turned his gaze to Azeroth, and to reach the planet, he needed help from within. Xavius, Azshara's trusted advisor, was the first to hear Sargeras' whispers. He mistook them for a divine message and brought them to Azshara. Enamored by the Titan's power, she and her Highborn welcomed Sargeras, believing he would purify and remake the world in their image. Xavius began to channel the well's power to open a massive portal beneath Azshara's palace. Through it, demons of the Burning Legion began to pour into the world. Fellhounds, dreadlords, and other horrors spread across Kalimdor, destroying anything in their path. But not all Night Elves stood with Azshara and her belief of a new world. Malfurion Stormrage, the first druid, recognized the threat and formed the Kaldorei Resistance with High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind and Commander Jared Shadowsong. Together, they prepared to fight the growing madness. Sargeras, sensing this resistance, ordered the Legion to wage full war on Azeroth, but the world did not stand alone. Cenarius, the Ancients, the Dragon Aspects, and other races like the Tauren joined the fight. Even Illidan Stormrage, Malfurion's brother, took up arms against the Legion. While Malfurion worked to collapse the portal, Illidan and his allies fought their way to the Legion's commander Manaroth. They held him off long enough for Malfurion to reverse the spell. The portal collapsed, dragging the demons and even Sargeras back into the void. But to complicate the matter even further, in secret, Illidan filled several vials with water from the well before it exploded. With the portal destroyed, the unstable energies of the Well of Eternity erupted into a cataclysmic event known as the Great Sundering. The ancient supercontinent of Kalimdor was shattered, much of the land sank into the sea, and countless Kaldorei perished. Some were dragged into the depths of the oceans and transformed into the Naga, twisted sea creatures cursed by their arrogance. With most of the Highborn either dead or scattered, the surviving kaldorei turned away from the arcane. They returned to nature, settling in the sacred glades surrounding Mount Hyjal. But Illidan Stormrage had not abandoned magic. He poured the vials he had taken into a lake at the top of Mount Hyjal, creating a second Well of Eternity. For this act, his brother Malfurion had him imprisoned and placed under the watch of Maiev Shadowsong. Under the leadership of Tyrande Whisperwind, the Night Elves focused on healing and rebuilding. They left their ruined cities behind and lived simply, forming settlements like Nighthaven among the trees. In time, the dragon aspects returned. Upon discovering the new well, they feared that it might again draw the Legion's attention. To protect the world, they formed a pact with the kaldorei. Alexstrasza planted a blessed acorn in the waters, and from it grew a mighty tree, Nordrassil, the first world tree. Nordrassil was planted to hide the well's presence from the cosmos, and to symbolize the balance between the arcane and nature. Nosdormu granted the kaldorei immortality so long as the tree stood, and Ysera bound their spirits to the Emerald Dream, a realm of nature and harmony. In return, the druids agreed to enter long periods of hibernation, allowing their spirits to travel the dream and aid in restoring the world. The cost of this deal was steep, but the Night Elves accepted it. They had learned that unchecked power comes with a price. This time, they chose harmony over ambition. After the War of the Ancients, Sargeras was far from impressed with Xavius. Furious over his failures, the Dark Titan subjected Xavius' spirit to torment. But instead of destroying him, Sargeras saw potential. He decided Xavius could still serve a purpose, just not in his original form. He became the first satyr. Upon returning to the world, Xavius was given two missions. The first was to corrupt as many Highborn as he could, turning them into satyrs like himself. The second was far more personal, to bring Malfurion Stormrage, the druid who had destroyed the Legion's portal, to Sargeras himself. But capturing Malfurion would prove harder than expected. During a fierce battle between the two, Xavius confronted the druid and his ally, a young night elf named Chandris Feathermoon. With her help, Malfurion struck a final blow. Using one of Chandris' arrows as a focus, he channeled nature's power and grew a great tree that absorbed Xavius' essence, sealing his body and spirit within. Strangely though, that tree survived the Great Sundering, and was later found on the shores of Azshara near the Coral Sea, still holding the cursed remains of Xavius. Now, I know you might be wondering, what does a tree infused with the soul of a demonic night elf have to do with any of this, and how does it relate to Teldrassil? It may seem like a footnote, but it's far more important than it appears. Around 4,500 years before the First War, Archdruid Fandral Staghelm took it upon himself to combat a new growing threat, Saronite, a dark and mysterious metal surfacing across Azeroth. Unknown to many at the time, this metal was the blood of the old god, Yogg-Saron, seeping up from deep beneath the earth. Without consulting the Cenarian Circle, the organization that leads and safeguards the practices of the world's druids, Fandral took branches from Nordrassil and planted them over the recently surfaced, tainted sites, including a particularly large Saronite deposit in the Grizzly Hills. From this, a new world tree grew, Ande'thoras-ethil, meaning crown of the snow. Though furious at Fandral's recklessness, Malfurion and the other druids of the Cenarian Circle admitted the plan seemed effective, but that peace did not last. Soon, violence erupted between the Taunka and the forest nymphs of Northrend. Their conflict was uncharacteristically savage and unrelenting. Concerned, the Cenarian Circle sent an expedition to investigate, and what they found was horrifying. Andrassil's roots had burrowed so deep they were touching Yogg-Saron's prison. The old god's influence had begun to seep into the tree, warping it and everything around it. Andrassil had no defense against this corruption. In the end, there was no saving Andrassil. With heavy hearts, the Cenarian Circle decided to cut down the tree. It was then renamed to Vordrassil, meaning broken crown. Though these newly planted trees stopped the spread of the Saronite, the damage was far worse than they thought. Unbeknownst to the druids, Yogg-Saron had used the roots of these great trees as gateways into the Emerald Dream. Through these breaches, seeds of corruption were sown. Over time, those seeds would grow, spreading decay through Ysera's once pristine realm. This marked the beginning of a darkness that would come to be known as the Emerald Nightmare. Now stay with me, because this is where everything starts to connect. Exactly 10,021 years after the Great Sundering, after millennia of night elf solitude in the forests of a shattered Kalimdor, the world tree Nordrassil became the centre of a rising storm. Our story resumes during the Third War. The Eastern Kingdoms had fallen into chaos. Arthas Menethil, once the Prince of Lordaeron, had embraced darkness, spreading death as the scourge consumed the land. After the fall of Dalaran, Jaina Proudmoore gathered the remaining Alliance forces and sailed west to Kalimdor, following a vision sent by the mysterious prophet Medivh. Medivh revealed that the Burning Legion had returned. He urged the Horde and the Alliance to put aside their hatred and unite against this far greater threat. Meanwhile, Tyrande Whisperwind and her Sentinels encountered the Legion firsthand. She saw the scale of the invasion and realised only the ancient powers of the Druids could stop it. She awakened Malfurion Stormrage, her former love, and together they set out to awaken the other sleeping druids. Tyrande, on a separate path, found the prison of Illidan Stormrage. Believing his strength would be vital in the war to come, she freed him, despite the warnings of others. Illidan swore to fight the Legion and set off into Felwood, and it was there he clashed with Arthas, who enticed him toward a powerful artifact, the Skull of Gul'dan. Tempted by its strength, Illidan consumed the demonic power within and destroyed the Dreadlord Tichondrius, but it came at a cost. When Malfurion and Tyrande discovered what he had become, Malfurion banished him. As the final battle in the Third War approached, Medivh brought the leaders, Thrall, Jaina, Malfurion and Tyrande together at Mount Hyjal. Strongholds were built to slow Archimonde's march towards the World Tree. Human, Orc and Night Elf forces stood together against the Legion. Archimonde tore through their defences, but it was all part of the plan. As the demon reached the summit of Mount Hyjal, Malfurion sounded the horn of Cenarius once more. The ancient spirits of the forest responded, sacrificing themselves in a great burst of energy that obliterated Archimonde and his army. Though victorious, the Night Elves paid a heavy price. Their sacred world tree, Nordrassil, blessed by the dragon aspects to grant them immortality, was sacrificed in the final explosive effort to destroy Archimonde. With its fall, the Night Elves lost their protection from age, illness, and mortality itself. In the years following the war, Nordrassil slowly began to recover, but just 2 years after Archimonde's defeat, Archdruid Fandral Staghelm and a group of his followers sought to create a new world tree, one that would hopefully restore the Night Elves' lost immortality. Malfurion warned them against the act, but when he mysteriously fell into a coma, his spirit lost within the Emerald Dream, Fandral pressed forward unchallenged and assumed leadership of the Druids. And so, the second world tree, Teldrassil, was planted on a small island off of Kalimdor's northern coast. Over time, it grew to pierce the clouds, and within its vast boughs, the Night Elves built the city of Darnassus. Darnassus stood as a reflection of Night Elven culture. Its graceful bridges, tranquil groves and winding leaf-covered paths paid a tribute to their deep bond with nature. At the heart of the city rose the Temple of the Moon, a magnificent sanctuary that served as a spiritual centre for High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind and the Sisters of Elune. Teldrassil, like all world trees, was connected to the very life force of Azeroth. Unlike Nordrassil, however, Teldrassil was not blessed by the dragon aspects at its creation. Just like Andrassil in Northrend, it was exposed to corruption. Nosdormu, the bronze aspect whose blessing had once granted the Night Elves eternal life through Nordrassil, refused to bless the same gift upon the new tree, Teldrassil. He viewed their desire as rooted in arrogance, a lesson unlearned from the past. Though Teldrassil appeared to thrive as it grew skyward, corruption had already begun to fester deep within its roots, slowly spreading through the surrounding lands. Grown unnaturally fast over just 2 years, the tree was unstable. For young Night Elves, the journey began beneath the boughs of Teldrassil, in the serene glade of Shadow Glen. Newly awakened to the world, these adventurers were guided by Ilthalane, who taught them the fundamentals of survival, nature, and duty. Their earliest tasks were humble but vital, cleansing corrupted patches of fell moss and defending the forests against the increasingly aggressive Nalpine firbolgs. Whispers from the forest spirits hinted at a deeper corruption and the fact that it had never been blessed by the dragon aspects. Harpies had taken to the skies, satyrs crept through the shadows, and the very essence of the land felt unsettled. Before they could leave Teldrassil for the wider world, these young heroes had to prove themselves. They fought back against the spreading corruption, purged the threats plaguing the forests, and earned their place among their people. But as they soared from the boughs of Teldrassil on the back of a hippogriff, heading for Darkshore and beyond, one question still remained. How long could Teldrassil withstand the darkness festering at its heart? So, where was all the corruption coming from? The answer lies beyond the physical world, in the Emerald Dream, the sacred and primal realm of nature tied to the Night Elves' deepest spiritual roots. It was here that the corruption truly began to take hold. As corruption continued to seep into the Emerald Dream, the Druids grew weaker, their connection to nature being strained. This same corruption was spreading through Teldrassil and affecting the land around it. But that was just the beginning. In the years that followed, the situation would spiral into something far more serious. The old god N'Zoth, long slumbering in the depths of the world, had begun laying the groundwork for the Hour of Twilight, the prophesied moment when the old gods would break free from their prisons and bring about the end of all life on Azeroth. To set his plan in motion, N'Zoth reached into the dream and found a perfect pawn, the tormented, imprisoned soul of Xavius. Twisted by the old gods, Xavius set out to spread his corruption deep within the Emerald Dream. His first move was to manipulate Fandral Staghelm, turning him into a willing servant. Under Xavius' influence, Fandral grafted a fell-tainted branch taken from Xavius' own corrupted tree into the new and young world tree, Teldrassil. Through this dark connection, Xavius established a presence in both the physical world and the Emerald Dream. This bond between the worlds granted him the power that would define him as the Nightmare Lord. Malfurion Stormrage investigated strange disturbances within the dream up until the 27th year when Xavius captured his dream form. Trapped between realms, Malfurion could not awake in Azeroth. With Fandral keeping his physical body weak and vulnerable, he inflicted mental torture and slowly altered his body into that of a tree. Xavius continued to expand the reach of the nightmare, corrupting more creatures and spreading fear throughout the dream. We don't need to go into the details, but in the end, Xavius was defeated, and with his fall, the grip of the nightmare weakened. Malfurion was eventually able to remove the corrupted branch, restoring Teldrassil to a purer state, one closer to what it was always meant to be. Later, during the wedding of Malfurion and Tyrande Whisperwind, Alexstrasza and Ysera both bestowed their blessings upon the tree. These gifts from the Lifebinder and the Dreamer offered a renewed vitality and protection to Teldrassil, which would remain guarded by their grace until its final day. Despite all of this though, the tree could still not return the immortality the Night Elves once had. Without a blessing from Nozdormu, the aspect of time, the gift of immortality remained lost. Not long after, Teldrassil's recovery began to falter. Subtle signs of corruption returned, raising concerns that the Emerald Nightmare had not been fully vanquished. Even with the political tensions of the time and the devastation left by the cataclysm, the Night Elves focused their efforts on helping Teldrassil. The corruption they found in the tree was not new. It was a lingering remnant of the original taint, rooted so deeply within Teldrassil that it could not be purged without destroying the tree itself. Fortunately, the blessings of the dragon aspects was empowering Teldrassil to resist the corruption itself. Slowly, the tree was forcing the poison to the surface in a physical form that the Night Elves could confront and destroy. At the heart of this resurgence was the Bough of Corruption, the final trace of Xavius' influence upon the tree. It was the source of the fell moss that was twisting the gnarlpine, the timberlings, and other once peaceful inhabitants of the forest. After the third invasion of the Burning Legion, the world was left weakened, and a new danger emerged: Azerite, a mysterious and immensely powerful substance. War Chief Sylvanas Windrunner didn't see it as a gift, she saw it as a threat. She feared the Alliance would harness this new Azerite to forge devastating weapons, which could one day be turned against the Undercity, Silvermoon, and eventually the entire Horde presence on Kalimdor. To preempt this possibility, Sylvanas launched a calculated campaign to seize the World Tree Teldrassil. At the time, the Alliance used Darnassus, perched within the boughs of the tree, as a strategic harbour to transport Azerite from Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdoms. Controlling Darnassus meant cutting off the vital flow and denying the Alliance of critical advantage. As she prepared for the invasion of Teldrassil, Sylvanas gave the orders to Nathanos Blightcaller and Saurfang to secure the beachhead. During the preparations, Sylvanas encountered a mortally wounded Delarin Summermoon. Delarin pleaded with her, reminding Sylvanas of the person she once was, and condemned her war as one of driven by hatred. She warned that while Sylvanas may be able to kill the Night Elves, she would never destroy their hope. These words struck at a nerve. Sylvanas, flashing back to her own failure to protect Quel'Thalas from the Scourge, responded coldly. To her, life was suffering, and hope was a lie. As Delarin lay dying, Sylvanas whispered that she grieved not for the kaldorei, but for her, for someone who still believed in hope. With that, Sylvanas turned Delarin's head to face Teldrassil one final time, and gave the command.
Burn it!
As the war shifted back to the mainland of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, the Horde and the Alliance erupted into what would become the Fourth War, a conflict etched into history. Far from the front lines, the once majestic World Tree continued to smoulder. Its flames eventually died out, not by intervention, but by nature itself. All that remained was a blackened husk, a scar on the land, and a haunting monument to loss. The vibrant life, beauty, and cultural legacy woven into its roots, now slowly fading into memory. Years later, a deeper truth emerged. The Burning of Teldrassil had not just been a tactical strike, it was part of a far more sinister plan. Sylvanas Windrunner had been acting in service to the Jailer, a being from the Shadowlands who sought to disrupt the cycle of life and death. By igniting Teldrassil, Sylvanas created a catastrophic event with mass casualties, funneling countless Night Elf souls into the Maw. This act of horror was a deliberate move to feed the Jailer's power. And so, the tale of Teldrassil ends not in triumph, but in ashes. What was once a towering symbol of peace, power, and ancient beauty now stands as a charred monument to betrayal, loss, and the fragility of hope. Its roots reach deep into the history of the Night Elves, their dreams, their resilience, and their identity. But in one terrible moment, all of that was set ablaze. For those who remember the scent of its groves, the songs sung beneath its boughs, and the lives lost in its fall, Teldrassil will never just be a memory. It will be a wound, a warning, and a reminder of what happens when hope is burned and vengeance takes root.